Well, hello everybody. My name is Bruce Donald. I'm the president of the Farmington Valley Trails Council, and I'm also the chairman of the Connecticut Greenways Council and the chair of the Connecticut Committee of the East Coast Greenway. So I wear a lot of different hats, but I did want to thank you for coming here today to this summit. It's been about a decade since we did the last one, long since overdue to do this again. So, why are we here? The Farmington Canal Heritage Trail, and it's named a bunch of other things, is a unique destination. It is the longest multi-use trail in New England, and when completed will certainly be, obviously, one of the longest multi-use trails in the nation. We want to brand this trail in some form or another. We want this trail to be a single destination, even though it's very long. So that's the first thing. The second thing is we want to create and nurture tourism that comes back every year, that recognizes it as a tourist destination. And those two things are critically important. I might even add a third here, which is potentially get the National Park Service to recognize this as a trail itself. And we'll discuss that maybe a little bit more in our breakout sessions. But I think that's another critical component of this too. Briefly on us, the Trails Council. We've been around for 21 years. We're one of the largest such organizations in New England. We grant over $40,000 a year over the last 6-7 years now to various municipalities, like-minded, not-for-profit organizations, etc. We have an Adopt a Trail maintenance program, a Trail Ambassador program. We do educational and information programs. We give out somewhere around, I guess this year we gave out about 11,000 folding trail maps, 3,000 handlebar bells, I don't know, 1,000 or so, purely in the interest of safety for people, and obviously for information for the trail map. We have a new trail map coming out for the 2015 year, which we actually just signed off on. We sponsor rides and service projects, and we are very happy to be the sponsor of this summit. Okay, so on the right you see a graphic representation of what this trail actually is. And while there are still gaps in it, and we'll discuss those, it is 16 municipalities, 80.2 miles of safe off-road ADA compliant trail. It is 70% complete. Urban, suburban, and rural connections throughout our state and well into western Massachusetts, as we all know. It is uniquely historical and scenic. It is part of the East Coast Greenway, which is a key issue in Connecticut, not so much in Western Mass. And it draws hundreds of thousands of users a year. So, this is kind of hard to see, but this is everything, essentially. If you look down on the far right in red, it is 68% completed. 60% in Massachusetts, 72% in Connecticut. You will notice in yellow 2 towns. One of them is Southampton, one of them is Plainville, where it has been very difficult, very time-consuming, and I could go on and on with superlatives for those 2 towns. But obviously ongoing, let's put it that way. And there are a lot of people deeply involved in both those 2 towns that want to see them succeed and build this trail. 2 other towns I would note. Westfield is actively building trail right now, which is just fantastic. I was up there the other day, in fact. It's just so cool. And Cheshire is another town that is building trail as well. Cheshire is going to be done in 3 pieces next year, 2016 and 2017, according to DOT. That 2017 piece, we'll see. I think that might be an aggressive timetable for the last little piece of Cheshire. But anyway, what this shows is that the easy parts have been done, and some of the easy parts have been done for almost 20 years. And it is a proven commodity in those towns where it operates, and has, I think, proven to the towns where it is not built that they need to build it. And so I think that's really the takeaway from this particular slide. Okay, so what has this whole thing been called? Well, the original canal of 1835, when the big portion of it first opened, was called the Farmington Canal in Connecticut. The New Haven and Northampton Canal, kind of overall for a period of time as a corporate name, and the Hampshire and Hamden Canal primarily in Massachusetts. The first railroad, the New Haven and Northampton Railroad Company, was chartered in 1846, really started going in 1847, and everyone, of course, called it the Canal Line. And in fact, no matter who owned it, they really still called it the Canal Line, at least locally. It was the New Haven, Northampton, and Hartford Railroad up until really the early 30s, and then it changed hands a whole bunch of times. It was the Penn Central, it was Conrail for a while, and then Guilford was the last corporation that finally sold off most of the right-of-ways in the 80s, at least in Connecticut, although some of those right-of-ways have reverted to Pan Am, as we all too well know. And I don't want to go there right now. Again, nomenclature. So the modern trail, starting in the late 80s, the Farmington Canal Heritage Trail, as we call it now, it was always designated that federally, but it wasn't called that in Connecticut. It was called the Farmington Canal Linear Park, primarily down south. And then up where we are, in fabulous Simsbury, Avon, Farmington, up to the border up in Suffield, it was called the Farmington Valley Greenway. And you will still see signs around here that say Farmington Valley Greenway, and down south that say the Farmington Canal Linear Park. Obviously, in the last 4 or 5 years, really, our Trails Council has been trying very hard to brand it in Connecticut as the Farmington Canal Heritage Trail in total. Down south, as many of you are aware, it is called a whole raft of different things. Having to do, by the way, with the fact that each individual town, just like Connecticut, has had to move these projects along themselves and has generated, as we have as well, advocacy groups that primarily are within those individual towns. So you've got the Southwick Rail Trail, this is going north, the Columbia Greenway Rail Trail, the Southampton Greenway, the Manhan, and I threw in the Norwottic, even though it goes east-west, because it's up there in Northampton and it's part of this general milieu that we're talking about. Okay, visual branding. At some of our last meetings, we talked about the possibility of having a logo for this whole trail, so the 80-plus miles of trail. This is a classic example of an icon-type logo that our graphic artists, Dornenberg and Gellenbach, came up with a couple of months ago. And it evokes very little, other than it shows a trail going into the sunset. Yeah, right. And some water, so it shows some water. This particular grouping has been used by the Farmington Canal Rail to Trail Association, our sister organization to the south, for 20-plus years, and evokes much more of an historical type of relationship with the canal, and then the railroad, and then obviously the off-road usage of the railroad right-of-way. So these are just, I throw these out because these are just ideas, but you know, in our talks this afternoon, in terms of facilitating those talks, these are things that I wanted to talk about up front so that we all had these in our minds when we're thinking about as we talk to each other. And this going back to usage, I think this is important. We don't have to go through these next 3 charts particularly, other than to show that red number, over 250,000 individual users of this trail system just in the Farmington Valley. So multiply that by almost 4, 3.5 for the whole trail system, and you get a whopping amount of users using this trail in many instances every day for commutation. It's a pretty big deal. Note the weekday peak day volume in Farmington of 565, that's a day, and the day in Suffield, which is fascinating because, of course, that's the state line, right? 1,066 in one day last year. This is, by the way, these are last year's numbers. I'm going to compile this year's numbers for 2014, but on average, they're up about 5%, just so you know, year to year, which is pretty impressive. Westfield just did a manual trail count, and I don't know how many of you saw that. I wanted to put it up. Note a Sunday day, and I don't have the exact day. I think they did this in August at some point, if I'm not mistaken. September. It was September? Okay, great, thank you. But note that 985 number, which equates very favorably to the number that we had, electronically counted. Now this is manual counted. So, and you really want that when you're going for grants. So this is, I wanted to put this in because this is a key component of what we're talking about. Oh, I gotta go back. In red at the bottom, that's actually less than I would have thought. 34% of the people using the trail aren't wearing a helmet. Now, when you go to Europe, as I know some of you have, no one wears a helmet, except for bike racers. In America, we've been trying really hard to get people to wear helmets. This is an interesting number. You know, at any given time, and of course it's apocryphal because I'm just standing there next to the trail, but I've counted more like 50% down where we are that aren't wearing a helmet. So this is an interesting number. I put this up as well because this reacts very favorably with our electronically counted numbers. And in fact, that number of 1 to 2 or 2 to 3 is indeed the peak number in the Farmington Valley as well for usage. And in fact, on weekends and some other things, you actually get kind of a head and shoulders type of thing, where you've got, so that's 1 or 2 up here, down, and then a little bit of shoulders for the morning commute or the morning usage and the early evening usage. And then it drops off to nothing in the rest of the day. So I wanted to show that as well. So here's a few of the folks that are here. I wanted to thank everybody for coming. I would like to introduce Craig Della Pena, who is another one of the sponsors of this and was one of the original sponsors, in fact, a decade ago as well. He's been in and around bike trails and bike trail phenomena for, I don't even know, 20 years now? Yeah, right? Let me give you this for the camera.
Okay. Well, thank you, Bruce. And thank you all for coming here this morning. This is actually the third conference I've organized this year. The other two were largely oriented on the east-west corridor. I live in Northampton, Massachusetts. I live at the northern end of this trail. My wife and I operate a bed and breakfast that sits 8 feet from the trail. And then we're at the western end of a 100-mile rail trail being developed across Massachusetts, where there's a 1,000-foot tunnel in the community of Clinton. And that's where we had one of our conferences this year. This is the last one for this year. But I really, when I saw that Parks Trails New York had released a report about the economic impact of that project in New York State, I knew that I had to do this conference here, at least call Bruce and Jim Cassidy to see if we could set this up and bring Fran in to talk about this. Let me go to the next slide here as I chat with you. But the interesting thing is, back maybe 15 years ago, I was invited to write a series of books about railroads converted to trails. And I was under contract to write a book about New York trails. And one of the people I met there was Fran Gottschalk. And Fran was the executive director of a group called Genesee Valley Greenway, which is a sort of north-south oriented trail in the Rochester, New York area. And we biked along that day out there, and that was in the 1998, remember the year, oh my God. And we just had a grand time. And through the years, I've stayed in touch with Fran, and she moved on to be now the Director of Policy and Programs for the Parks Trails New York, which is, for lack of a better term, a a statewide Rails to Trails Conservancy organization. They're not really affiliated with Rails to Trails Conservancy, but they do that work. They're based in Albany. I know many of the staff, and we partner together on things when I'm in New York, like the Columbia Valley Greenway, Columbia Land Conservancy. I'm involved with that just over the border from the Berkshires and teaching them how to reassemble dead railroad corridor. I'm a realtor in Massachusetts, and so I specialize in the sale of houses near rail trails and teach land trusts how to reassemble dead railroad corridor. And so I'm staying in touch with Fran's group out there often about what's going on in New York from where I touch base with people. And I said to Fran, I said, why don't you come out and speak to this group that will hold it in Simsbury, which is halfway between New Haven and Northampton, and see who comes out. It'll be a fun event, and your report is so compelling that it's going to be a big hit. And this will be the sort of launch. Because in Massachusetts and Connecticut, small states, borders close by, it's difficult to do any kind of by-state thinking, by-state regional planning. This is the first interstate trail in New England, yet it's really not thought of in one fashion. And so you may be surprised to know, and Fran will be talking about this, but it wasn't easy doing the Erie Canal Trail, Buffalo to Albany, because you would think New York, Buffalo to Albany, it's all one heritage corridor, but it's something that's very difficult to do, even in New York. So Fran will talk today about some of her challenges there and her organizational challenges to partner with the state of New York to get this thing built. This is 11 years ago, next month, would have been the first time we were here doing this event. And it was really a newfangled idea back then to talk about this 80-mile corridor in one fashion. And so here we are again to revisit this, and it's becoming sort of in the background of many people's minds. But what does it mean to really do this? And so Fran will talk today about her experience in New York and maybe some hints and pointers for us along the way here to emulate what took place in New York. So thank you. And Fran, could you please? Thank you.
Oh, no.
Let's go back, and we'll hit this.
Well, I want to thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to come here and to visit your trail and speak about our experience in New York State. And I was also really pleased to see one of my friends from the Genesee Valley Greenway, Ann and Jim Hutton, who moved here to Connecticut and I guess are regular users of the trail here. And Jim was on our board for Friends of the Genesee Valley Greenway when I was working with that project. So what a delight. And I want to thank Bruce, and I want to thank my good friend Craig for all your work on behalf of Trails and for inviting me here. And what I'd like to do as I talk about our experience with the Erie Canalway Trail is encourage you to ask questions. Because I see this more as a dialogue than just a talk. And so what I'd like to do is talk about the Erie Canalway Trail experience, but what I want to do first is to give you a little bit about the genesis of the Erie Canalway Trail so that you can get a better idea of how we at Parks and Trails New York, working with the New York State Canal Corporation, got to a point where we felt that an economic impact study was really needed. And then after giving you some information about what we found with the study and what that means for us going forward, also a little more about some of the plans that we have at Parks and Trails New York to build upon the results of the economic impact study. So let's begin by a few vital statistics on the Erie Canalway Trail. But as I listened to what Bruce just said, I felt like saying, yep, right, Erie Canalway Trail, a lot of the same things. But first I want to ask, how many people here may have visited the Erie Canalway Trail in the past? And what parts have you visited? Just quickly, sort of everyone kind of raise your hand and say.
Lock number 7.
Lock number 7?
I forget the towns, it was a few years ago, but I watched the boats going.
Okay, and yes?
I'm Marvin Ward, and at the time you started this initiative, I was living and teaching in Schenectady, New York.
Oh, okay.
The first segments that was open was there, and I wrote in those days, back in the early 70s.
Right. How about?
Just outside of Rochester in this past spring.
Okay. Who else? Yes. Okay. Who else?
And from Syracuse east 18 miles. I don't remember the name of it.
In the old Erie Canal State Park. Right. Yes.
I actually have done a lot around the Schenectady because I have friends there. I've also done a piece way over near Buffalo.
Okay. Anyone else who's, yes?
I went to school at the University of Rochester and wrote the Genesee
Right, right. And then there is Craig.
Yes, Buffalo to Albany.
Yes, Craig.
The Erie Canal Trail, and I stayed in bed and breakfast all along the way as part of the big ride to the canals.
Right. Yeah, you're an end-to-ender. Anyone else? Yes?
I've actually done, I think it's related, I've done some of it in a canoe in the canal.
Okay, and I'm not really going to talk about that, but that is something that is evolving in terms of developing the Blue Way Trail using the canal. It's not something that we hear a lot about and that there's been a lot of publicity related to, but it is definitely sort of in the plans to further develop. So the Erie Canalway Trail goes from, as the song says, Albany to Buffalo, or Buffalo to Albany, however you want to do it. 360 miles long. About 77% of it is complete. That's about 277 miles that's open to the public. Part of it is paved, and most of it is stone dust. Unlike you all, who have a wonderful paved trail. Now, a few weeks ago, my husband and I visited here, and we rode on the section between Simsbury and East Granbury, and we also rode on the section between Hamden and Cheshire, and we thought it was fantastic. We have 234 communities along the length of the Erie Canalway Trail, and multiple ownership. You might think Erie Canalway Trail, we have a New York State Canal Corporation, so it must be all owned by the New York State Canal Corporation. Well, the canal is, but not the trail. Only a third of the trail is owned by the New York State Canal Corporation. The other third is owned by the New York State Office of Parks, Recreation, and Historic Preservation. And another third is owned by individual municipalities. In some cases, it's a county or a village or a town. And also in some cases, the state parks owns the trail, or owns the land, but they have a management agreement with a county in the Mohawk Valley, for example. And so a county is the one that really operates it. I also want to point out that the Erie Canalway Trail is really a part of what we call the Canalway Trail system. And here's Erie Canalway Trail from Buffalo to Albany, but we also have the Cayuga-Seneca Trail and Cayuga-Seneca Canal that goes from Geneva up here to sort of Clyde, Port Byron area. We have the Oswego Canal, and someday there is plans for a trail to go along that canal to take you up between Syracuse and Lake Ontario. And then there is the Champlain Canal, which goes from Waterford up to Whitehall, really at the base of Lake Champlain. Now, there's about 7 miles of the Cayuga-Seneca Trail that is complete. Really not much of anything other than maybe a little river walk in Oswego and a couple of other places of this trail. And then the Champlain Canalway Trail, for all of you who live obviously much closer to that, watch carefully because they are really going great guns in developing trail from Waterford to Whitehall. And I think there's probably about 20 some miles of that are done. It's sort of on, you know, a little here, done, onto the road, a little here, done. But that group that is really spearheading that effort is so highly charged and focused that I think that that's going to maybe get complete before the full Erie does. We have 6 major gaps left in the Erie Canalway Trail. There's one here between Buffalo or Tonawanda and Lockport. That's construction is beginning right now this fall on that. We have a huge gap in the city of Syracuse. Very difficult problem. I think you were mentioning, Bruce, you know, all the low-hanging fruit has been done. Very same thing here with the Erie Canalway Trail. We have some gaps in the Mohawk Valley, again, there because of right-of-way issues. And then a gap here by Cohoes and Green Island, just before you get into Albany, also related to right-of-way issues. But we still have 277 miles complete. When it's all done, the Erie Canalway Trail will be the longest intrastate trail in the nation. When we fix and do all of those other lateral trails, it will be 524 miles. So just a brief little history, and that's going to help to explain a lot of what you were also saying, Bruce, in terms of how did we get to where we are. Well, in the 1960s, commercial traffic on the canal at that time called the Barge Canal, that was the name, it started to drop off. And communities started to look around and think that maybe that towpath had some other uses, some opportunities for recreation. So in isolated places along the corridor, communities individually kind of just sort of organically started some trail development. I think the state saw that that wasn't such a bad idea after all. And so in the 1970s, and that was when you were talking about the Schenectady area, also in Rochester and in Buffalo, people started to really begin to get into trail development in earnest. And the state also then charged the State Parks Department and the Department of Transportation to work together to develop the canal for recreational interests. And they created the New York State Canal Recreation Development Plan. And over the next 2 decades, probably around about 100 miles of trail were developed under the auspices of state parks and DOT working together. Then in the 1990s, and I think it's because they had responsibility, primarily DOT, for operation of the canal, of the barge canal. And you know, those things are very expensive to operate. Keeping locks and waste weirs and all that sort of infrastructure in good order is not cheap. Well, the legislature transferred responsibility for the canal and the associated lands to the New York State Thruway Authority. Why? Because they had cash. And they had cash because at that time a lot of people were driving, they were paying their tolls, and they had money that they could devote to keep the canal in good order. It was then that the New York State Canal Corporation was created as a subsidiary of the New York State Thruway Authority. And the Canal Corporation created a canal recreation way plan that addressed the use of not only the water, but also the associated towpath lands adjacent to the canal for recreational use. That plan has been updated over the years. In fact, the update of the plan is going on right now. There's going to be a new generation of that plan in a year or so. During this time, since the 1990s, the New York State Canal Corporation has created an additional 100 miles of trail and refurbished 100 miles of trail, because a lot of that trail that was created in the 70s was narrow, and there were some issues with it because where it was created, those are the places that nowadays are getting the greatest use. And so they've had to widen it and make it a little more accommodating for all the types of uses and all the number of users that now are out there on the trail. In 2000, we also became the Erie Canalway National Heritage Corridor, and you mentioned that. And it's interesting because many of the things that you mentioned, Bruce, were things that I have on a slide at the end of this presentation, kind of thoughts that I had when we visited the corridor and I thought about the corridor and I read that all that you have done. It seemed that that Heritage Corridor, National Heritage Corridor designation, and all that can possibly come with it might be something that is well worth exploring for this corridor. And they produced a preservation and management plan. And if you haven't seen it, I encourage you to go to the Erie Canalway National Heritage Corridor website, and you can click on that management plan. And I think you will, I don't know if you've seen it or not, but it would be very instructive in terms of a framework for things that you might want to think about for this corridor as well. I just also want to mention that the New York State Canal Corporation, in the last 20 years that they've been responsible for the trail, have done some really good things. You can see here the wayfinding signage. This is the logo. It's really a Canal Corp logo with different colors and a boat and Erie Canalway Trail. I think if we started all over again, would we do that? I don't know. I think we would have chose something a little more individualized and not so much related strictly to the water, because that's one point that I didn't make, and that is that we talk about the Erie Canalway Trail. In Western New York, you can cycle right next to the working waterway. You get into Central New York, I forgot who it was that did the piece from Syracuse East, Old Erie Canal State Park. That harkens back to when State Parks was working with DOT to develop the canal for recreational purposes. And the Erie Canal has really had three lives. The Erie Canal was first opened in 1825, and that canal was very much like this Farmington Canal. Then in the mid-19th century, business was so great that they enlarged it. And then in certain places, it took a different route. And what was it called? Oh, no big surprise, the enlarged Erie Canal. And that operated until 1918, when business was so great that they felt they needed to make it even wider, even bigger, to take, obviously larger barges and commercial traffic. And what they did there is they, man over nature by this time, they went out to the Mohawk River. They channelized the Mohawk River. They channelized the Seneca River. And that's where they placed this 1918 canal, which they renamed the Barge Canal. So you have places in central New York where the trail doesn't follow the existing waterway. It follows that historic enlarged Erie Canal. And it's more in terms of environment like your Farmington Canal. Then when you get into the Mohawk Valley, remember the commercial boat traffic is now out in the Mohawk River. There the trail is actually built on the old West Shore rail line. So it's really a rail trail. And in some places you can see the river canal / canal, and other places you can't. And then as you get even closer to the capital region, there's even a part that was just acquired from Guilford Rail, now CP Rail. So there's another parallel. And then actually in western New York, it goes up along the Niagara River. And in far eastern New York, as it comes down into Albany, it parallels the Hudson River. So I just want to make sure that when we talk about Erie Canal, it isn't all walking or cycling along the present day Erie Canal. So it changes the type of environment. But I think we're stuck with this logo, and the good thing is that the Canal Corp has placed those logos out on the street. So if you're driving along and you're looking for where is the trailhead, this helps guide you to it. Now, I don't know that that's what's here, because I will say our experience was when we were here a few weeks ago, where are the trailheads? Craig had said, take Route 10, you'll find it. Well, we're on Route 10, but where's the trail? And if there were once you agree on a logo, some signs that directed you to it, that's a way for even people that live locally to know how to access it. The Canal Corp also created a style booklet that communities and they use for a consistent signage in terms of typography and color. And they've created something else which is really nice, what they call biker boater campsites. Very primitive, limited, generally at locks, but it's just a place where you can pitch a tent and spend the night. There aren't many of them. That's one of the things that the Erie Canalway Trail really lacks, is a lot of opportunities to camp. So where does our organization, the statewide not-for-profit Parks and Trails New York, fit into all of this? Well, since 1998, we have been very, very fortunate to have had a partnership with the New York State Canal Corporation. And we've worked together with them and with those other partners that I mentioned, State Parks, DOT, Erie Canalway National Heritage Corridor. In a sense, we're all in this together. We all do different things. But what we've done working with the Canal Corporation is to help with trail development. We haven't run any shovels. We haven't paid for any asphalt or stone dust. But what we've done early on is went out to all the communities where there wasn't any trail, and we helped bring community members together to create what we call gap reports. So we got the communities thinking about, we don't have trail now, what's it going to look like, where's it going to go, how's it going to be developed? And that really has been the basis for what the Canal Corporation and State Parks and the other entities have used to go forward with the actual construction of trail. We've also tried to build a common identity, because we have the same naming problem that you mentioned, Bruce. In Western New York, the trail that goes along the Niagara River, even though it is placed exactly on where the Erie Canal was historically located, it's called the Shoreline Trail. They're thinking very locally. That's okay, but we're trying to get them also to at least put a Canalway Trail logo on their signs to reinforce that this is also part of the Erie Canalway Trail. In central New York, the part that's Old Erie Canal State Park, they've called it Old Erie Canal State Park, not identified it as the Canalway Trail. In fact, I called up someone who lives in one of the towns on that part of the Canalway Trail and said, you know, we'd like to come and work with your community to do a bicyclist spring business workshop. And she said to me, are we on the Canalway Trail? So, and this was only 2 years ago. So, you know, we have that identity issue as well. In the Schenectady area, you know what it was called. What was it called?
I've forgotten. It's so many years ago. 40 years ago.
All right. Mohawk Hudson Bike Hike Trail.
Okay.
And that is...
I had that name when I first wrote it because it didn't connect to the Hudson yet.
And that's exactly what most people locally still call it there. In the Rochester area, for a long, long time, it was called the Erie Canal Heritage Trail. So we've worked very, very hard to, you know, when people talk about the Mohawk Hudson, we reply, yes, the Erie Canalway Trail, et cetera, just trying to reinforce that identity, community engagement, and we've tried to do that through many of the things that you're doing. We have an ambassador program. We have an adopted trail program. And I'll talk about some other ways as well. And promotion. We have tried to promote the trail through events, maps, activities, not only to a faraway audience, but also to the local audience, because there's still a lot of people who really don't realize what a wonderful resource they have in their midst. We have been working very hard over the last really 16 years to get communities to see that the Erie Canalway Trail not only can be an economic engine, but also can be a wonderful addition to their quality of life. So one of the first things we did when we started with our partnership is we started our Cycling the Erie Canal bike ride. Now this was in 1998, and then we chose to do it right around now, in October. It rained and it was cold. There were 40 people on that bike ride, and there wasn't really that much trail that was developed. But what were we trying to do? Raise the visibility statewide, raise the visibility even within each individual community. It doesn't seem like much, but when 40 bicyclists descend on your community, we hoped people would take notice. And they did. And then in successive years, we actually moved the ride to July. And since then, we've been doing it the second week in July, and we have about 550 riders each time and hundreds of volunteers. And we stop in Canalway Trail communities every night. We have rest stops in Canalway Trail communities. This is a way that we really show Canalway Trail communities that people are interested, and they do come from afar. We've had people from every single state. We've had people from all over the world. We've had children as young as 3 riding in a little trailer behind, actually pedaling. I think it was a 7 or 8-year-old that did the full 400 miles from Buffalo to Albany. And then this last few years, we've had a man who came to us, I think he was 88, and he said, I'm going to do the ride. He did it. He came back when he was 89, and then he came back again this year, and he did it when he was 90. So, you know, when I work the end of the ride and I see that, I think, gosh, anybody how to be able to do it. I guess but you got to train for it. You can't just hop on a bike. Although we had a woman once who was 75 years old, won a bike in a raffle and decided she was going to do cycling the Erie Canal. I mentioned our Adopt a Trail program. I'm sure very similar to what you're doing. It's a way to engage communities in the stewardship of the trail. And also we try very hard with caps and shirts to get them to feel like they're part of a larger effort. And a specific sort of cleanup event that we have every year, right around Earth Day, we call our Canal Clean Sweep. We've been doing it for 9 years now. It occurs all across the corridor, and when I say all across the corridor, Erie Canal, Champlain, Oswego, Cayuga, Seneca, all those pieces of the Canalway Trail system. We have over 100 events. It involves about 3,000 volunteers and 150 groups. But we work very hard to try to create this umbrella and this feeling that we're all in this together, we're all working, and the way we phrase it is, the canal is opening for the next navigation season. It's time when people are going to be hitting the trail again, and it's the equivalent of cleaning up for company coming, and to sort of reinforce that visitors are coming, and let's get out and make all of our communities and the trail and the canal as best as it can be. And what this has done is it's grown out to be, it started out as just focused on the canal and the trail, but in many communities they've used the opportunity of our Canal Clean Sweep to really do a community-wide cleanup. Maps. Maps are very important, and you talked about the maps. About 10 years ago, we decided to create a guidebook, and we actually modeled it on the Ohio and Erie Canal Heritage Corridor Guidebook. It fits in the back of your cycling jersey. We've got 40-some full-color maps, 136 pages. We're in our third printing now. We're doing the update for the 4th printing of this guidebook, and we've sold over 20,000 copies. And it is a moneymaker for us. And, yes?
Oddly, I didn't mention that in my conversation, but we're actually going to do the second round of the Connecticut version of that. And it's in process right now, hopefully for 2015.
Right now, this, I think this is an older version. I think it's about $24, $25 that we sell this for. And in terms of community engagement, we make contact with all of the communities, ask them, the businesses, if they want to be listed in the guidebook. And so we are reaching out to the communities, and it's another way of reinforcing to them that the canal is important. It really is something that people want, especially if we tell them, you know, we've sold 20,000 copies of this. And so I think it was well worth our effort. What we did is we put all the maps and a lot of the information from our guidebook on our website. And so there is an interactive map which is now optimized so that you can have it on your phone. We were a little worried that by putting it sort of freely available like that maybe our guidebook sales would go down, but you know what? They haven't. And I think one of the reasons is that people, you know, well, they'll check something on their phone, but they still like to have these maps and this information. Yes?
Do you charge businesses for the listing, or is it free?
No, we ask them, now this kind of listing is all free. We do the research, but we have, you can buy ads as well. And for example, the Empire State Bed and Breakfast Association, you know, did an ad.
That's important information for somebody who's wanting to start out a project like that.
That's right. And if you later on want any more information about what we did here, be happy to share that with you. Yes?
Many of these rail trails, canal trails, have in-district
very much more interesting.
Yes, we have in our maps, we have things to see and do, travel and trail notes. And in the notes, we have, little vignettes about interesting things in that section of the trail. And each map is 10 miles.
And I was thinking particularly to the history of the trail and heritage type thing, that there was industry and all kinds of activities in the past. These were hubs of attention.
We have a whole section here called A Brief History of the Erie Canal. And it's, for the sort of uber canal historian, it's probably not enough, but it certainly does give people a flavor. And that's one thing that the Erie Canalway National Heritage Corridor has done very well for the trail. They have done a number of interpretive signs and given grants to communities to help them develop interpretive signs, and they have developed their own style sheet for how those should look. And so with the Canal Corp and the Erie Canalway National Heritage Corridor working together, there is a lot of richness in terms of the interpretation aspect.
So when you're saying signs, are you saying the historical type of a sign, that you said a style sheet for that?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, and I think actually, again, on the Erie Canalway National Heritage Corridor site, they may have as one of their resources that style book, so you can see kind of what they recommend. Now, one of the other things that we have done to encourage communities that bicyclists do bring business is since 2006, we've done roundtables called Bicyclists Bring Business, where we come to a community, we invite community leaders, business owners, trail enthusiasts, local organizations to come out and listen to a presentation first about what is the status of the Canalway Trail across the state. Because if you're in one community, you may not really be clued into what's happening everywhere. And so it's a reminder again that you're part of a much larger whole, and also we talk about what other communities do elsewhere, outside of New York State, in other states and even in Canada, to attract, I say, to market to and profit from the cycling tourist. Now those have been very, very popular, and so what we did is we developed this guidebook, Bicyclists Bring Business, a guide for attracting bicyclists to New York's canal communities. Well, it says New York's canal communities, but it really can be any community who wants to attract cyclists. I brought some of them. I think they're all gone, but it is on our website, and you can get it downloaded from there.
What's the name of the organization that
It's our organization, Parks and Trails New York. And ptny.org. And my last one I'll put here, and the first one to the table gets it. One of the things that we have done, though, in addition, in the last 3 years, is we have instituted what we call our biker rounds. So in an evening, we do our Bicyclists Bring Business presentation. We usually have 50 to 75 people in a community. And then the next morning, we do a bike round. And what we do is we say, we're going to make believe that we are coming to your community for the very first time. And we want to see the community through the eyes of a cyclist who might be looking for a place to eat, a place to stay, or some attraction to visit. And we want to think about whether indeed you would feel like you'd want to stop. Because certainly on the Erie Canalway Trail, there are many communities. Often they're spaced about 15 miles apart because that's where the mules were changed. So if it doesn't kind of ring out to you, you might say, well, I don't know. I think I'll just try the next one. And so what we're trying to do is, okay, will your community kind of get the attention of a cyclist or not? And we just did one in the Western New York cities of Tonawanda and North Tonawanda earlier this week. And the mayor of Tonawanda was with us, first time on a bike in 8 years for him, but he was really pleased because he said it did exactly what we hoped it would do. He saw his community from the eyes of a cyclist. And he has an opportunity now to make some infrastructure changes that will make Tonawanda even that more welcoming to someone to stop. So what did we use, and you can too, is in the back of this guidebook, we have some checklists. How bicycle friendly is your canal community? On the trail, in restaurants, all businesses, B&Bs, motels, hotels. There's a whole checklist here, questions that you can sort of ask of yourselves or of businesses, and they are sort of prompts to think, things to think about. Every community is different, but we use that checklist as we go around the community, and then we prepare a report for the community, and they've used that to get other grants or to really sell their elected officials on doing some more infrastructure developments. And as you mentioned, we have an ambassador program. It's another way to put a positive face on the trail. We have our end-to-end program. Craig is, I don't know if you have been on our honor roll or not, but of course everyone that does our cross-state bike ride gets on that honor roll because they've gone from Buffalo to Albany, but you can do it in sections. You don't have to do the whole thing at once, but if you do it sort of progressively and then you come to our website and say that you've done it, we don't ask for verification, but then you can get on our honor roll as an end-to-end program participant. Here we've got this woman is just doing 25 miles a day from Buffalo to Albany. She's just puttering around, seeing the sights, and all these photos came from one of our ambassadors, who's a retired professional photographer. And when he sees someone that he thinks is kind of not from here, he stops and chats with them and asks them if he can take their picture, and then he gets a little background on them, and we really have some wonderful vignettes of the people that are using our trail. This woman here, named Leanna, is from South Africa, and she is biking the world. And she was, going from Buffalo to Albany on the trail. I don't know where all the other places she was going in the United States. And I think one of the other things that we've been very involved in is our Close the Gaps campaign. I mentioned that there are about 6 major gaps in the Canalway Trail that still need to be completed. In 2010, we decided that we really needed to raise the visibility. I think it was, as you mentioned, the low-hanging fruit had been picked, and there was maybe this feeling like, well, okay, the road's got a wide shoulder in some of those places, so there wasn't a lot of dedication to really move on those really somewhat intractable problems. So we hooked up with U.S. Senator Kirsten Gillibrand, and we held meetings in the location of all of those gaps. And what we did is we brought a lot of attention to the gaps, and we got communities more invested. We tried to get all the partners to believe that with a little bit of effort and creative thinking, you didn't have to, maybe the gap is 8 miles long. Okay, you can't do 8, but can you do 1? What's the big problem? What's the most intractable problem in this gap? How can we solve that? And I think we've had some great movement. We've raised the visibility. People in Erie Canalway Trail communities are now using the terminology, close the gaps. Not something that had happened before that. But you people in Plainville, I'm stealing your idea. This is great. Close the gap with a hole right in the business card. That's fantastic. High marks for that. Yes.
Before you go off that map, that only shows the main canal. It doesn't show any of the others that you talked about.
That's correct.
And I have a connection from childhood with what was called the Chemung Canal.
Yes.
In Watkins Glenville, Ohio, because I was born in Mountain Falls.
That's right.
And
And
I've ridden the portions of it that are now railroad.
right. And I didn't touch on that because I'm really touching on sort of the Erie Canalway Trail pieces. But there were many other laterals. The trail that's closest to my heart, the Genesee Valley Greenway, was the Genesee Valley Canal. There is the Chemung. There is the one between Penn Yan and Dundee. There is the one that goes through Norwich and from Utica down south. It's all escaping me right now. But there are a number of other laterals that we would love to also see developed. Some of them, it's more possible than others because of the history in terms of how they were broken apart and sold off to private interest. It makes it very difficult for some of those to be developed. But there are wonderful groups that are trying to get those developed. And you can go other places, the D&H, more in the Hudson Valley. So yes, but I'm really talking about the ones that are associated with, that still have working water, and part of what the Canal Corporation is doing in terms of the whole Canalway Trail system. But thank you for bringing that up. Yes?
I'm curious, with these gaps that you're showing on the map here, is there any sort of common theme to why they're not built? Because it seems like they're pretty well dispersed throughout the corridor. Except for Syracuse, you did mention that geographically it's just a little difficult, but was there any theme that you see in all these gaps?
No, this gap here had to do really right-of-way and funding. This is a right-of-way issue, a long story. It was actually supposed to have been built 10 years ago. Long story. Syracuse, the canal, the historic canal, went right through the middle of the city. Erie Street, Erie Boulevard in Syracuse. And then the 1918 Barge Canal went up to the north through Baldwinsville. And they made a street out of it. And so it's, there's no easy pathway through the city of Syracuse. Rome, a similar kind of thing. Here in the Mohawk Valley, again, right of way. There, we're not along the canal. It's along, in many places, along the old West Shore. But in this case, the utility owns those pieces of the old West Shore. And getting a utility, even though we're going to try, Craig's given me some tips, it's a difficult situation. And then by here, Amsterdam to Rotterdam, that was just bought from C.P. Guilford Rail within the last year by State Parks. So State Parks is, as I say, a third owner, and they are beginning to develop part of it. There was a very difficult problem with the CP rail actually crossing the corridor, and there was a long, protracted dispute over who owned that crossing. But silver lining in the cloud of Irene and Lee, because Rotterdam got flooded out terrible. In order to address some of those drainage problems, they are going to work out a solution because FEMA will pay for a tunnel that CP Rail never wanted to pay for. They're going to pay for a tunnel, and we're going to get a crossing where that railroad had blocked the trail for a long, long time. And when I say block the trail, what they did is they parked their cars right across the trail. And what it meant was people were lifting their bikes over the couplings of the cars. Not a good situation. So there's an end in sight, and then the Green Island piece, it's right of way again. That's the problem. So this is what we have done over the last, let's say, 10, 16 years to create a climate where we've raised the visibility and interest in the Erie Canalway Trail. And we've gotten people really thinking about how important it is for their own citizens as well as visitors and the tourism potential of the trail. But it didn't come easily, and it didn't come, you know, with everybody on board. And as I tried to explain, it's something that's taken a long time to develop. But what we're hearing is, oh, yeah, we're getting more business, more people, but we didn't have any statistics. It was all anecdotal, and we felt that our advocacy efforts and the opportunities for communities to really feel that this trail was worth it, worth really embracing fully, we needed to have some real data. And that's how we decided to do an economic impact study. Now, it didn't happen just because we wanted to do it. We had to find a funding source. So we had to convince really the Canal Corporation and the Erie Canalway Heritage Corridor that it was worth doing. And that didn't happen overnight. But finally they said yes, and they provided us with some funding that helped us to, we had an RFP, and we chose Dr. Paul Scipione, who was a professor emeritus and director of the Survey Research Center at the State University of New York at Geneseo, south of Rochester. And he and 28 of his students conducted the quantitative and qualitative research. And as I said, why did we do the study? Well, really what we wanted to do is go from the anecdotal to the specific. We wanted to get comprehensive data on trail usage and on economic impact. And as I say, we wanted to confirm the anecdotal belief that the Erie Canalway Trail was really beneficial with hard numbers. And this is not the first study this is the first study, but then not the last study that we want to do. So we wanted to have something that would establish a benchmark and a methodology that we could use in future efforts. So how did we do the study? Well, there were two main aspects of the study. First was trail counts in order for us to get annual visitation. Now, I know that you've done trail counts on your trails as well. We used a slightly different methodology with actual observational trail counts, and then in 5 different locations we set up an automatic trail counter, so we got 24/7 counts. But we only had one of them, and we had to move that around to 5 different places. We also did trail user surveys. That's what the students did. They went out and randomly selected people on the trail. And what we wanted to get from that is information from trail users, how much they were spending per visit, per trip to the trail. And we also wanted to learn more about who those trail visitors were, demographics, preferences, lifestyle components. So what did we learn? Well, we learned conservatively there are about 1.58 million visits per year. Now, I say conservatively, and the reason I do that is that we sampled only in we broke the trail up into 13 segments. And in a few segments, we did sampling in several locations. But in many segments, we did sampling only in one location. And those were big pieces of trail, 20, 30 miles of trail. So I think that there's a lot more visitation out there than we captured. But this is our best guess and best estimate at present. If we had more time, more people, more electronic trail counters, I think we could have even better numbers. Although we made sure that we sampled in those areas where we knew that there was the greatest use. So the places that kind of weren't sampled were the very rural areas, because the Canalway Trail goes through metropolitan areas, suburban areas, and also a lot of really rural, hardly anyone there places. So what does that 1.58 million visits represent? Well, I won't go into all the stories, but it could be just a mom, a grandmom, and their daughter out there. This is someone training for the Special Olympics. These are two guys who came up from Florida and are biking from Buffalo to Albany. This is a couple where the man had major heart surgery 5 months ago, and he's out on the trail as part of his rehab work. This is a family, a man with his son in a little bike trailer just out for an afternoon, a woman walking her dog. This group, they're doing Buffalo to Albany. I think the woman came from one place and the man from another, and they met and did the route. It's hard to see here, but this is Matthew. He lives in Leeds, England, but he started out in Anchorage, Alaska on his bike. And he's biking, he biked all the way across Canada. Now, how he went down the Alcan Highway, I don't know, with the Grizzlies, but anyway, he did. And he entered the U.S. at Niagara Falls, and he was coming across on his way to New York City. That's about it. So that's just a snapshot. And what's important is these are people that were captured on the trail in just a 2-week period. That's all. So just a really little snapshot. Now, when we did the study, we divided our usage into local and non-local. And how we define local is people who, when we asked them what was their zip code, they said that their zip code was one of the zip codes in a county where the trail is located, and the Erie Canalway Trail is located in 14 New York counties. And then we also included the 21 counties that surround those 14 counties. So our local definition was 35 of New York's 62 counties. Now that's a pretty wide area, and maybe it's too wide, but what we wanted to do was to really get a sense of who was bringing money in from the outside. What we found is that a lot of the usage is local. 92% of the people that we surveyed said they lived in one of the 14 Erie Canalway Trail counties. Now, that doesn't mean that when we surveyed them, they were in one of those counties, because we also found that you might say that your home zip code is Buffalo, but they were surveyed in Schenectady. What we found is that Erie Canalway Trail residents are out visiting other places on the canal corridor, and that's great. Now, 97.5% of the people that we surveyed lived in those 35 counties, that blue area on the map that I just showed you. And 50% said that they lived within 5 miles of the trail. Now, some people go, oh my gosh, we don't get any outside visitors. Well, there's a great opportunity to market to more outside visitors, but you've also got a captive audience of people that are going to see your messages about, oh, I'm a restaurant right on the trail, or I've got a bike shop right on the trail, maybe 365 days a year, because you live right there. You're going to see those marketing efforts more often than if you're living in a distant state. Now, how much do these people spend? According to what they told us, they spend about $210.6 million per year on their visits, those 1.58 million visits to the trail. Now remember, I want to make the distinction. This is not visitors, it's visits. So it could be me coming 1.58 million times, but it's visits, not visitors. But it's all about eating and staying overnight. Notice that the people in Zone 1, that's the blue area, and some of those said they stayed overnight because those are the people that might live in Buffalo that were in, let's say, Schenectady. They account for 63% of that spending. People that are from Zone 2, those are people that live outside the blue area. They could live in another state, they could live in another part of New York, or they could live abroad. They account for 21% of the spending. although they only account for 2.5% of the visits. So it really is about eating and staying overnight. Overnight visitors, 18% of the visits, 84% of the spending, and 74% of the spending is on lodging and food. So what's the impact of that spending, the economic impact? Whoops. Total impact, $253 million. The impact on taxes, $28.5 million. Now, $17 million of that is sales tax impact, and $11 million of that is income tax impact. So it's that tax impact includes local, state, and federal sales and income taxes. And the total number of jobs that represents is 3,440. We got these numbers using the MGM model. If you're into any of that economic impact stuff, it is one that is used by the National Park Service and was most recently used on another long-distance trail, the 220-mile Katy Trail in Missouri. But you can see here that bars and restaurants, 32%, groceries and takeout, foods and drinks, so food about 40%, and lodging 34%. Now, when we talk about economic impact, generally the focus is on new money, money that's coming from outside the area, and that is those people from Zone 2, outside that blue area on the map. They represent 21% of the overall spending, and that economic impact was $55.8 million and represents 731 jobs. We also wanted to know not only specific stats in terms of spending and number of people, but we wanted to know, so who are these people? What motivates them? Why did they come to the trail? What are they interested in? Because we feel if we knew that, then we could provide that information to all the businesses and tourism officials so they could perhaps better craft their marketing messages to appeal directly to the people who are using the trail. The typical trail user is employed, college educated, male, and they're cycling. They're a member of Generation X, 30 to 49. Now, I would have thought maybe it was a little older than that, but the greatest percentage of age categories is that Generation X, 30 to 49. They had an average household income. In New York State, that's $56,000 around $56,000 per year. And the greatest number of people were in that sort of $50,000 to $75,000 household income category. And they spend minimally $26.37 per person per visit. Now, this is primarily on food, souvenirs, and on transportation. Remember, that's because most of the people visiting are local. So what do the results suggest for future marketing efforts? Well, capitalize on generational differences. You can see here that, as I said, 41% were in that Generation X, 34% were baby boomers between 50 and 69. Now, these demographic groups get information through different communication channels. There are different things that they like. So if you want to cater to one market or another, it's helpful to know, kind of who's using the trail and whether you're going to use email or whether you're going to use social media or whether you're going to use brochures and those kinds of things to target your market. Promote the canal history. Notice that 35% said they definitely were interested in canal history, and 44% were somewhat interested in canal history. This is something that you have a lot of with your trail. So what it said to us is Erie Canalway National Heritage Corridor is doing a great job of it. also all the local businesses and communities. Beat the drum for canal history because that's what people are interested in. Engage the healthcare community. Why is that? Well, the Canalway Trail is one of the best assets for ensuring that residents get the physical activity that is needed that you've got. And people who are using the trail are doing that. We found that 56% of those surveyed said they use the trail for health, exercise, and fitness. And notice the difference here when we go over to those people in Zone 2. That's the white bar. Those are the visitors, the people outside the blue area coming from afar. And they said that they use it for tourism and recreation. It fits, doesn't it? But those people that live locally, and these are the ones in those 35 counties right here, for them, over 60% say that they use the trail for health, exercise, and fitness. And 61% use the trail weekly or more than weekly. Again, notice that this Zone 1, the blue area on the trail, those 35 counties, almost 30% use it 3 to 5 times a week. And more than 30% use it 1 to 2 times a week. And just a little less than 10% use it daily. And you can see, again, those Zone 2 people, only a few times a year, or it was the first time that they use it. And CDC says you should have 30 to 60 minutes of physical activity a day. 51%, when they come and visit the trail, they use it for 30 to 60 minutes per visit. So I think that we all have to do a better job in making the case to our healthcare providers that this is something that they should really invest in. And we know that in other places in the country, for example, Arkansas, Little Rock, there's the Medical Mile. They've poured millions of dollars into that trail, and the money has primarily come from healthcare providers. And what happened is someone got the ball rolling, and then it was, let's keep up with the Joneses. And so if that health group is investing, well, I guess we'd better. And something very similar was done in Texas along the Katy Trail there. So we haven't done it in New York State. I don't know if you've done it, but it's really, I think, an untapped market in terms of helping to get the kinds of things that we want for our trails, and that will really be an important additive to our quality of life. And beyond the physical health aspect, look at what the respondents said about the impact of the trail really on their mental health. We asked them, outdoor activities along the trail, do they have a very positive effect on you? 77% said definitely, 22% said somewhat. That's 99%. Almost everyone said the trail had a positive effect on them. That's certainly a lot cheaper than going to a psychiatrist. Another suggestion, create and promote cycling trips. And we have a cycling trip promoter right here, and I don't know if you've done any organized trips and rides. It was certainly sweet music to our ears because of our Cycling Mary Canal ride. And what we found when we asked people if they were interested in ever taking a longer trip along a significant portion of the trail, 69% said that they were somewhat or very interested in taking a longer trip. And remember, most of these people are people that live locally, because remember, 97.5% of the people that we surveyed were in that Zone 1, those 35 counties. So there's a existing kind of right around the corner, potentially untapped market. 61% said that they were interested in organized rides. 42% said they've not taken such a trip, but would be interested in one. And 19% said they had, but would be interested in doing another one. So the one question was, like, would you be interested in doing a trip? Not so much that it was an organized ride, but maybe, you know, making the suggestion and putting out there the ideas. Here's what you could do. You could bike from here to here on one day and here to here on the next. And, you know, they would do it independently. This is about an organized ride. And it's really all ages and incomes, not just boomers that are interested in this. 50% of those 30 to 49 said that they would be interested in an organized ride. And where are their incomes? Between $35,000 and $75,000. It's not all the high-income people that are interested in this. Another suggestion that we have from the results is there are opportunities for lodging establishments. We asked trail users where they would stay if they were going to stay overnight. And 42% said motels and hotels, 36% said B&Bs. Now, I would have thought that it would be higher for B&Bs, but it may be that along our trail, we really don't have enough B&Bs. There are B&Bs, but you've got to, you know, they're not right there. You've got to bike a ways to get it. And if you've just biked 40 or 50 miles, do you really want to do another 10? And then when you get to the B&B, maybe there's no place to eat around there. It's bucolic and out in the country, but what are you going to do? So I think we have a lot more to do in terms of providing enough lodging options. But it's certainly, if you were a hotel or motel owner, you might think, well, hey, people want to stay in hotels and motels. Maybe I need to do a little more to market myself as a place to stop. The results also show us that it's important to ensure that your communities are bicycle friendly. And I want to say congratulations to Simsbury, Farmington, and Northampton, who are bronze level bicycle friendly communities from the League of American Bicyclists. That is really a wonderful distinction. In New York State, we don't have that many communities that have that distinction. And we have a much bigger state and many more communities to draw from. So you're really right on that, and I think that's important and something that is really important to underscore when you're marketing yourselves to whether they're local or non-local cyclists. Because what did we find? Of the people that we surveyed, 69% were bicyclists. Now, you were talking about helmet usage. I think our helmet usage is less. I was trying to quickly rifle through the economic study and I couldn't find the page. But I believe that our helmet usage is about 50%. It's
That would make some sense to me. That seems to me that when I count, it seems to me like 45 around here, for instance. So.
That's right. It's nowhere near where it should be. We also found that the people that live within 5 miles of the trail, remember that's 50% of the people that we surveyed, 57% of those say they walk or bike to the trail. So if they're walking or biking to the trail, our message to our communities is you've got to make sure that when they do that, they feel safe. We also looked at another more specific trail user, and those were the people that identified themselves as an Erie Canalway Trail vacationer. And we wanted to see whether a vacationer had a very different profile than the typical user. And we asked them the question, are you visiting the trail today as part of a vacation? And that was 22% of the visitors. So what does that 22% tell you? It tells you that people from Zone 1, those in those 35 blue counties, some of them were also identifying themselves as Erie Canalway Trail vacationers. The typical vacationer is even more highly educated than the typical trail user. They're employed, generally male and baby boomers. 96% of the vacationers said that the Erie Canalway Trail influenced their vacation choice. They generally visit the trail with 1 to 3 others for 2 hours or more. Those are people doing a much longer cycling trip. They spend on average $939 per person per visit. Vacationers are an important market. Did you know that half of US adults participate in adventure vacations each year? And certainly, this would be a type of adventure vacation. 27 million people have taken a bicycling vacation in the past 5 years. And bicycling is the second most popular outdoor recreational activity, second only to bird watching. And we found also that these Erie Canal vacationers have money to spend. Look at the stats. More than half have incomes over $100,000. Now, this is, it's what they tell us in terms of what they spend, where they live, and what their incomes are. So it might be different, but that's what they told us. So how are we going to reach Erie Canal vacationers? What are they using to get information about the trail? Well, 42% said that they first found out about the Erie Canalway Trail through word of mouth. Now, word of mouth is a wonderful communication channel. You don't have to pay for it. It's great. So what it says to us is social media and satisfied visitors are very important. Our bike tour, I'm sure, has a lot to do with it. One person says, hey, I did this bike tour. I went from Buffalo to Albany. It really was great. Wasn't that bad. Everybody oogles and ahs. Oh my gosh, you did 400 miles. Then they tell, how did you know that Mary did 400 miles? And then people say, well, let me look this up. And that's how they found out about it. Now, they all aren't going to do 400 miles, but they may call us up and order our guidebook and do even a piece of it. When they planned their trip, they said they used our guidebook. And we weren't asking the questions, so obviously it was one of the choices, but I thought that was really great. The other map, we're not really sure, but I think it's that map that there may be still some left there from that the Canal Corporation, puts out. Internet search, and then our interactive map. So this information is all very helpful to us in learning kind of what we need to emphasize and do next. And then we ask, what drew you to the Erie Canalway Trail? 76% said it was the biking. So what does it say to us? It says that when we're marketing the trail, we need to emphasize how important and how great the biking is. Wonderful photos of people of all ages out there enjoying it. And make sure there's great natural scenery in the background, because people said that was also something very important. Notice 55% also said affordability. And tranquility, 43%. We asked people who were vacationers and staying overnight, where did you stay? Before we asked if you were going to stay overnight, where would you stay? This question was, you're a vacationer, you're staying overnight, where did you stay? It tracked almost exactly to the answers for the question, where would you stay? 44% hotel motel, 35% a B&B. And a number of nights stayed, because it's, okay, yes?
What percentage is
Off-road,
off-road?
about 23%, because of the Erie Canalway Trail, 77% is complete, so 23% is off-road. perhaps a little bit of the 277 might have a slight little jog on a road, but your off-road pieces are where the gaps are located. Oh, I'm sorry. Maybe I missed. Yeah, I mixed it up. On the trail is 77%. On the road is 23%.
I think that's probably your biggest draw when you say biking, and say off-road, I think that's a big draw.
It is a big draw, and that's why we are so committed to closing the gaps, because we feel that the Erie Canalway Trail has the potential to be the premier cycling destination in the nation. But it can never really achieve that until it's all off-road. No one wants to hear, well, you can bike from here to here, but then it's Syracuse, and especially Syracuse, because it's a city. And the places, even though we've tried to provide an alternative route, and right now the city of Syracuse and the Metropolitan Planning Organization is working on an off-road short-term signed, or an on-road short-term signed route that is as safe as possible, it's never going to be comfortable until you're off-road, or you're at least in a cycle track where you're separated from the cars, because having to do battle with that kind of traffic is just really terribly off-putting to people. So that's why we're so committed to closing the gaps. Thank you for that. And I just wanted to point out, it's all about heads on beds. And look at the number of nights that people said they stay. 37%, 3 to 6 nights. Can you hear the cash register ringing? 29%, 7 to 14 nights. That's what really adds up. So, I'm just about finished. What's our next step for Parks and Trails New York? Well, several things. One, we've got really good data to make the case in terms of our Close the Gaps campaign. We can go to our legislators, hand them a copy of the economic impact study and say, we're not just talking in generalities, here are the specifics, and this is why the $38 million that is estimated to complete the Canalway, the Erie Canalway Trail, is a great investment. And let's get about it. And we really are now thinking that we want to make it that, can we get it at least all underway? Maybe not finished, but underway by the time in 2017 when we celebrate the 200th anniversary of the first shovel in the ground of the creation of the Erie Canal. And so that's kind of where we're aiming, but we couldn't make the case as strongly as we can now because we have these results. The other thing that we did is even before we published the results, we had a little bit of information, and we used that as part of an application to the state, Empire State Development Department. They're the ones that run the I Love New York campaign, and we got a grant from them to create an Erie Canal cycling website. It's going to be called Cycle the Erie Canal, and it's going to be directed strictly at getting people to come to the Erie Canalway Trail and cycle. It's going to be a website, there's going to be collateral materials, there's going to be a PR campaign. It's this spring, it's going to be a whole big rollout. We are right now working with an advertising and marketing firm, a consortium of firms actually. We've never done anything like this before at Parks and Trails New York. Most of what we've done has been really us in-house. And, you know, we had maybe a graphic designer help us with a cover, something like that. But this kind of almost slick Madison Avenue marketing stuff is all new to us. But just the little bit that we've seen from them, they've just gotten started. You can tell in my voice, I'm really excited about it, and I think that it's going to raise the level in the visibility of cycling the Erie Canal. We're going to get people's attention, and hopefully we'll have lots of people coming to experience the trail. And the communities in upstate New York, who goodness knows really need that extra economic boost, are going to see the results. So, I have just some ideas as we've cycled a little bit of the trail. I've thought about our experience and I've thought about your experience. But I want to tell you how impressed I am with the Farmington Valley Trails Council and all of the various organizations that are working together to develop this trail. I read on the Farmington Valley Trails Council website that you have 1,300 members. Is that correct?
A little less than that, yes, but yeah.
I don't think there is one trails group in New York State that has 1,300 members. I am so impressed. It is incredible. And you don't have any paid staff, is that right? And you contribute about $40,000 a year to trail development projects. It's so impressive. I am just amazed. You are unbelievable. And what I'd like is, what's your secret? Because I'd love to be able to take that back to the trail groups that we work with. They would die to have that kind of support.
Dwight here is our former president. I've been the president for about 9 years now. And his comment was, if we knew what the president was, what the secret was, we'd bottle it or something like that.
Or we'd tell you.
Or we'd actually tell you. I will say one thing, which is that we are a regional organization. And I think that has a lot to do with it. Both in Massachusetts and Connecticut, we always talk about Connecticut being the land of 169 towns. You can't do anything in Connecticut on a regional basis. It's really hard. And it's been made that hard because of the political process. And in banding 9 towns together, which we've done as an organization, I think that we've gone a long way toward addressing that. And I think that's part of the appeal. So I think that, and there's other things too, but fundraising in particular for us has routinely been targeted towards specific projects, which I think is an enormous help, rather than just trying to raise money for something.
Absolutely, absolutely.
So there's a few things, but those are the major ones that come to mind.
Right, but there are a lot of other organizations that have tried to do all of those things and haven't been able to pull it off, and you have, and I think it's absolutely tremendous. So I just had some ideas, some of them that I already heard from Bruce. Common name, logo, identity. Who do you want to attract? Maybe it's not people from afar, maybe it's just getting more residents, maybe it's all about a bit of both. National Heritage Corridor designation, day and weekend organized tours and rides. You could maybe try a ride like from Northampton to New Haven. Yeah, it's not all done, but you've got a lot done. And and even with the Erie, we're thinking of it in marketing various blocks. We're thinking, yes, of our end-to-end ride, and great, everybody can ride 360 miles, but we're also thinking in good sort of long weekend, couple a day, Friday, Saturday, Sunday ways to market the trails so that people can go for an excursion and really enjoy it. They don't have to ride the whole thing. That's really not what is our main objective. Lodging packages, and I see that there's a Connecticut B&B bike trail on a website for tourism, but it was all road riding. It wasn't trail riding, so maybe they can kind of get a trail ride package. History-themed events, because at least in the Erie, it was canal stuff that really drew people in. And something we have tried, it didn't ever really get fully traction. We're going to have to cycle back and try again. Our Welcome Cyclist program. It's something that I know they do in Quebec and even in Ontario, where businesses, a B&B, restaurant, or whatever, has a designation right outside the door that says, we welcome cyclists. They agree to certain things that cyclists can expect if they stay there or if they frequent that restaurant. And it kind of, again, brands a community and businesses in a community that they really are interested in and welcoming to and want to see cyclists and prepared for them to come and visit. That's it. I'm sorry I went a little longer, but please ask any questions that you've got.
We have about 15.
Yeah. Yes.
Fran, the statistics about where your people are coming from is just absolutely fascinating. On the one hand, I think you're pretty generous in terms of extending that zone 1 out to most of the state of New York, but I wondered if for like the Eno Canal trail down in Washington,
Right.
Pittsburgh, whether you had any comparable statistics there. That one seems to be one that attracts more tourists. Do you have any comparable?
Well, Gary, I don't have our whole trail committed to memory, but I do know I'll leap over there and I can look at it, because in the study, what we tried to do with almost everything that we reported is look at was there information that was comparable from the Katy Trail, from the Great Allegheny Passage, C&O, and other studies that may have been done kind of peripherally related to the Canalway Trail, and any other trails that might have information that would be relevant. And so we probably have that in the study. It's just, it's not firmly fixed up here, and I've got to check it. Yeah. I think, though, that, and also it depends on how they define local. So let me look, and we can talk specifics afterward. Yes?
Belknap County in New Hampshire has done a study very similar to yours, where they made a big distinction between are the people local or out of the area and bringing in additional economic dollars.
Right. But most studies, I mean, all studies define their local differently. We wanted to be really generous, and the problem is that in some states, the adjacent county to an Erie Canalway Trail county might not be as big, but on that map, some of those counties are long and linear. So it was taking you all the way up to the St. Lawrence River, but we didn't know where to kind of cut it in the middle of a county. So that's why we did that. Yes?
In developing different segments of the trail, did you engage your chambers of commerce in any way? If so, how?
The Chambers of Commerce and the tourist promotion agencies have primarily been engaged in terms of promotion. They are part of the I Love New York program. They have taken out ads in our guidebook. They are sponsors of our bike tour. We work with them on our bicyclist spring business, roundtables, that kind of thing. Yeah.
I was just wondering, you talk a lot about cyclists, but what has been done to engage other uses on the trail and promote it? So the walkers and the people just, maybe not on the surface for the most part, but even horseback riding, is that something that's allowed?
Horseback riding is only allowed in certain areas. So that's really a kind of a local, people know that they can ride there, and because we can't advertise it. Yes. In terms of walking, that's really the sort of local promotion. We're focused on the cycling only because in terms of economic development, the majority of people are cyclists, and if they're going to go any distance, they're probably going to be cycling and not walking. But that goes back to where I said that even though 97.5% of the people are local and 92% live in an Erie Canalway Trail county and 50% live within 5 miles, that's where there's a real opportunity to encourage use of the trail for health and fitness, walking, and I have it in there, I don't remember, but I think we tried to split it out. So, okay, let's look and see what the predominant activity is for those people who said that they live within 5 miles. And again, I don't have it in my head, but it may be in there, and we can look at it later and see. Did I answer your question?
Yeah,
Okay, we'll go to,
If you had an accident anywhere on that trail, how would you report it? Or how would you get help?
the road crossings are in most places frequent enough that, and the way the gates are set up, an emergency vehicle could get down. Someone would have to have a cell phone. We don't have any, sort of emergency phones or anything like that along the trail. In many places, there are residences or other structures where people might be that you could go to, but there are places where there are long distances without any facilities close by, so a cell phone is really a good thing to have.
If those persons were visitors and they had a cell phone, I'm at the corner of Rock and Don't Want, so what is it?
Well, sometimes your cell phone will give just as it functions, give a GPS coordinate, I believe. But one of the things that I think that this trail does not do enough of is identifying each community, like I'm coming into Granby or I'm coming into Simsbury. On the Genesee Valley Greenway, we had actually stencils that were on the gates, and it had the name of the road. So if the person remembered, I just passed, ABC Road. We don't have that on the Canalway Trail, and those are all things that people keep suggesting, and it's something that I'm sure that the Canal Corporation is working on. But I say that also because that also brings up again the fact of the multi-jurisdictional aspect, because that's a real operational and sort of infrastructure issue. And the Canal Corporation cannot pour money into signage in a place they don't own. And so then State Parks has to decide that they want to do it. And you have to make sure that you would like to see a coordination so that the signage and what you do in one place is the same as what you do all along. We're not fully there yet as much as we would like it to be.
In Southington, we have circles painted on the trail with coordinates. So and you can see the next one from where you're standing. If you're standing on one, you can see the next one. So that, and it's tied in with the police, so being a coordinate, it'd be impossible not to know.
Yeah, and that's a great idea. The problem we have here is that only limited parts of the trail are paved. So that coordinate would have to be attached in a different way. Jim.
Comment on that, a friend of mine who riding against the other green 3 years ago, and he fell and broke his arm. And I got a lesson on one system. It's based on addresses. We weren't at the address. So so I quite a gyration trying to explain how it would work. But what they did after that is because we went to the 911 organization of counties, we got them to begin putting in mile markers on the greenway into their system. And I think the greenway has mile posts for 30-some miles. So the mile post is the key, but you got to get those in the 911 system.
Problem is that if you go on the local trail, you go to one town, it says one, you go to the next town,
Oh.
it says one.
Yeah.
You have a coordinate, but there's no question.
Yeah, and with the Erie Canalway Trail, the Genesee Valley Greenway is ahead of the Erie Canalway Trail. We established where zero was, and then, even though maybe trail wasn't complete in certain areas, we figured out sort of where the mile markers would go. On the Erie Canalway Trail, we have no mile markers, and that's a real problem. And the reason is because the Canal Corp has said, well, there are certain places where we don't have trail fully established, so we don't know if it might take 8 miles or 9 miles to get from A to B. Now, I think we're just on the cusp of being able to rectify that problem, because when the Amherst to Lockport section in western New York is completed, the only remaining gap that we have there then we will be able to set mile 0, and we'll be able to go all the way to Lyons, east of Rochester, and at least in that section of about 100, 120 miles, where we get to the next break, be able to definitively establish mile markers. Yes?
Since most of the users are men, what ideas or what are you doing to bring more women into the process?
Well, I know that in our Erie Canal marketing campaign that we're just in the beginning of developing, we were out doing what they call the beauty shots for the photos that are going to cycle into the front part of the website. And we wanted to make sure that there were women of all ages shown in those shots. And I'm sure that our marketing firm has some other ideas as to how we might pitch the Canalway Trail to other resources that women see more than men.
Do you know any reason why women aren't coming?
Actually, it's not like it's 90% men. The typical user split, I think, is 55-45. But when you get to the Erie Canalway Trail vacationer, I think that goes up, male goes up a little higher than that. And that's what you find when you look at the studies of other trails. It's kind of dead on what you see with most other long distance trails, or trails that are kind of comparable to this. So we were not surprised. It was just kind of affirming what others have found.
Fran, just to add on that briefly from our point of view, there's a little, it's not a little, there's a difference between paved ADA compliant multi-use trail and stone dust trail. And there's a certain barrier to entry. I don't know why it's gender specific, but I can tell you that paved multi-use trail is almost always 50-50-ish.
Interesting.
Male, female. So just, and I don't know why that is necessarily, but there's a difference.
That's interesting, and we don't have a way to, well, maybe we do, I don't know if we can go back and look at the data and see whether that bears itself out, but it's something that in subsequent surveys, we might want to, sort of check and see. Yeah. Yes, back there.
Yeah. I was going to say, I was going to say that, just to answer her, or following up on her question, that I would say that the number of women cyclists on trails are probably much higher than on roads. That was on a brief road.
Oh, yes.
And it was like about 60-40 or 65-35. So, but my question was that what I would call the one-way problem, because like trails just lend themselves to wanting to go from A to B. But how do you get back? And if anybody, people look at that, I know internet is starting to be more accessible, but okay, you're just not invested.
Yeah, it's a really important issue for us, and I didn't touch on it just because I could be here all day talking about the various aspects, and so Craig, give me the hook whenever you want to. But yeah, so I'll talk real fast, and if I can't answer it, then I'll talk to you later about it. But we have actually, when we got the Market New York grant, our initial interest was in actually getting like a business development loan from the state of New York, which would allow us to pilot a shuttle service. And except that the way that grant was structured, they considered it to be capital and infrastructure, and we had to put up 90%. Of course we didn't have 90%. So that idea went down the drain, but I don't know if any of you, I know Craig has, and my husband and I have, and several others at Parks and Trails New York have done the Petit Train du Nord Trail north of Montreal. And you know, what a wonderful system that is. They put you on a bus, they put your luggage, take it up and transport it from B to B, B&B. They take you up to the start of the trail and you just bike down and you go from B&B to B&B and your luggage is miraculously there every night and you get a French meal to eat. Oh my goodness, it was one of the best vacations I ever took. We would really like to have something like that, especially in Western New York, where we have now a really great piece, Lockport to Lyons. It's about a little over 100 miles, so very equivalent to the Petit Train du Nord. And we can't yet get someone to see that there is enough business to really make it their while to do the kind of service that you get with the Petit Train du Nord. And yet, even at our Bicycle Spring Business Roundtable that we had earlier this week, there is a man who has been doing what we call an informal sort of taxi service. He calls himself Mr. Dependable. Well, Mr. Dependable showed up at our Bicycle Spring Business and said that he is going to be restructuring his business, and he really sees that there may be an opportunity for him there to do that kind of luggage and bicycle transport. But right now, that is the saddest call when we get them. You know, I've only got 3 days. I'd love to bike from Lockport to Lyons, but how can I get back? I don't want to turn around, because then it's a 6-day trip or, you know, a 5-day trip. Amtrak, we are, along with the New York Bicycling Coalition and others, really advocating for bikes on trains. In New York State, only the Lakeshore Limited has a baggage car. Now they have changed and they will allow a bike to be, they're going to fit racks on those baggage cars so you can hang a bike like you can out in the Pacific Coast. But as far as retrofitting passenger cars so that you can hang maybe 2 to 4 bikes in a passenger car, we're not there yet. But I know that there is a advisory council, and maybe some of you are on that, working on a whole Northeast solution, because what I didn't realize is that those cars, I might be on a car on the Empire service going from Buffalo to Albany one day, and that car may be over in Connecticut the next day. So New York State is not going to invest in that passenger car being retrofitted if it's not going to be in their state. And the way it's set up now, New York State has got to pony up more money to Amtrak if they want a service that like the Empire service going from Buffalo to Albany. So there are lots of different issues that all have to be worked out. But I will say that Amtrak is more interested, more receptive than they've ever been, because up until this, they wouldn't even call us back. So maybe some of you have been even more up to date on that situation. But it's a huge problem. It's a problem that if we can get that transport service, I think it would be just magnificent and really open up a great market. You had a comment on that?
Vermonters, it serves us coming out of Washington, D.C. So I'm looking at how many states got involved.
Yes.
And of course, it stops at the border now. When you're trying to get it to go on into Montreal, Customs has to agree to setting a station up in gas on top, and that's not settled yet. So, but the Vermonter line, Amtrak is talking about the hooks in the passenger cars.
Right.
So we've made that much progress.
Right. Right. Okay. So I hope I've given you some food for thought.
Fran's going to be around.
Actually, just a quick question for both of you. Would it be possible to get copies of both of your presentations?
Yes.
Sure.
And it's going to be on local cable access here, and but it's going to be on a website. The local cable access channel here has it all their inventory online.
We can host them both on our website as well. Yes, I'll do that. In fact, I'll send. Make sure that you get.
Oops.
Thank you, Fran.
Yeah. I just want to say one more thing. I only have one of these, but this gives you an idea of what the Erie Canalway National Heritage Corridor puts out each year. So, you know, kind of some of the things that Erie Canalway National Heritage Corridor status might help with. And these are old, but again, in that sort of genesis of how we built interest and a commitment, we did these end-to-end touring along the Erie Canalway Trail in just discrete segments. They're old, out of date, but it was, again, something that we did to give a vision of what you could do walking or on a bike, and where you might stay and the things that you might do.
Funding for Simsbury Community Television is provided in part by contributions from viewers like you. Thank you.